Hey, Stephen, thank you for coming in. We've done an interview before. You're doing amazing work. We covered some of your history and prior interviews, your work with YPO and so on. And so this is a continuation from an interview that we did a number of months ago. In fact, over a year ago, right? So, you know, you have this marvelous history. So just a really bit of catch up here. Really a phenomenal business person. Incredible history of business success. You have success as a writer, as an author. You have a success in launching this thing called Million Peacemakers, and it's used globally and so on. So we're going to continue on this journey, get updates, and then talk about the summit coming up as well, of which you're a key part. So again, really appreciate you coming in and sharing so much with our audience, Stephen.
No, thank you, Stephen. It's great to see you again. And thanks for the leadership that you have both in Million Peacemakers as a board member for the last several years and as the chair of the advisory council for for the Impact Council of YPO.
So let's talk about Million Peacemakers. It's a nonprofit organization, as I mentioned, scaled globally. You've got AI embedded as a tool to do, this Nonflict process, and you are co-author of this best-selling book, Nonflict: The Art of Everyday Peacemaking. So let's do some catch-up. What's happening with Million Peacemakers today? What are some of your goals in Million Peacemakers? And what are some recent activities involving Million Peacemakers that you'd like to showcase or spotlight to the globe?
Well, thank you, Stephen. So Million Peacemakers was launched in 2014. Myself, Dr. Mir Kafir, who's my co-author, and Frederic Latray, who's a YPOer who I met at a conference in Los Angeles back in 2013. And since then, we've trained about 240,000 peacemakers in the Nonflict way, impacting close to 8 million people. So that's all been very exciting. But what we're most excited about now is our youth initiative with a focus on empowering youth to learn and use and share the Nonflict way in their various communities around the world. And we have two amazing leaders running that who are on the board of Million Peacemakers. So Theodora Sauvé from Montreal, Quebec, who's a law student. She just graduated from the business faculty at McGill and was the valedictorian there, and incredible young lady. She has a coaching and figure skating background, so very disciplined, great work ethic. And her co-chair is Gianluca Piranfuselli from Argentina, speaks 6 languages. He's been involved in youth leadership since he was 12, including a startup NGO, which has been very successful. And they've put together a team of about 60 youth from around the world. And they have various committees that match the ones that were on the Million Peacemakers organization side, and now we're actually working to merge their committees with ours, so that we're all working together. We're learning from them; they may be learning a little bit from us, and we're really co-creating a more peaceful future for ourselves and our children, future generations. So that's a common goal that we have, and we're really energized by them. And that's the most exciting thing I could share.
Can you describe maybe some events that you did this year, and then some events and areas that you want to spotlight in terms of initiatives next year as well?
Sure. So with the youth, we participated in One Young World. We did a virtual workshop for them, which is a very large youth leadership nonprofit that's global, and they were based this year. They did in Manchester, the UK, and we also participated in Younga. Actually, you introduced us to Younga, which is an amazing, also youth leaders, and we had over 100 young people on that. And actually, Gianluca, because this is the second year we've done Younga, and Gianluca came out of the one from last year. So thank you indirectly, actually, for the introduction, because you through that introduction actually brought us Gianluca. So those are two events that we did with them, and as well from the corporate side, because we use the corporate to help pay the way for our nonprofit efforts. We do workshops with our coaches and myself as well. We had one recently, I'm just thinking most recent, with a impact-based real estate firm that brought in our workshop to their leadership team of 14. And initially they couldn't think of a conflict to share, because we always use their real life conflicts, but they found one with a partner that managed one of their properties, and they were about to leave that relationship due to a conflict. They thought that that partner didn't share their values of really caring about their customers. And when we did our exercise and they went through putting themselves in the other partner's shoes and answering the questions of Nonflict, what are your facts, what are your feelings, what's important to you, they realized if they were in the position of their partner, they would probably feel the same way. And they had a lot more empathy for the other side to then move through the steps of Nonflict and resolve it even without the partner being there. And frankly, they shared that saved us millions of dollars right there, because they were about to drop out of that relationship that brought them millions of dollars. And their employees were all behind it, and the CEO was behind it, and they totally transformed. And they later shared what happened with that business partner, who was so impressed with everything. He bought Nonflict books for all his employees, and it's really gone further. They're now looking to bring Nonflict to the apartment buildings that they manage and the people, because often property managers deal a lot of the time with conflict, and that they would have those tools and the people living in their apartments have the tools. So this one workshop looks like it's really going to have a lot of legs. Going forward, we're really excited about doing International Nonflict Month in May 2023. We've got about 20 countries or cities, and in different countries actually, signed up with youth to lead in each of these countries a Nonflict event over one of the weekends in May. And it's going to be throughout the month because of the different time zones and different holiday statuses in different countries. So we are working really hard to that. We have a new executive director, John Moyle, who is really spearheading that with our youth team.
Definitely, this program is so popular globally, and it's growing and throughout different regions of the world and so on. Can you sort of in a nutshell describe Nonflict and that process of Nonflict?
Sure. So Nonflict is another way of dealing with conflict. Most of the common ways of dealing with conflict are to avoid conflict or fleeing conflict, using force or power to deal with conflict, just folding, giving the other person what they want, or often very commonly compromise or 50-50. And when we polled CEOs, I did this workshop once with 700 CEOs, and I asked by a show of hands, but a third of the CEOs admitted that they avoid conflict. And we know culture starts at the top. So if they're walking on eggshells around conflict or avoiding it, you could think that you could assume pretty strongly that the culture of that organization is just avoiding conflict. About a third of them admit to using force or power, do it or else. And that is not a culture that really helps to encourage innovation. And by the way, conflict is just two or more different perspectives coming into contact with each other. By definition, it's neither positive or negative. It's how we deal with it is either constructive or destructive. So the purpose of Nonflict is to give us a more constructive way of dealing with conflict, because we need constructive conflict for innovation and growth as individuals and organizations. So the 3 steps of Nonflict are: first, to understand yourself and your partner. What's important to me? What are my facts and feelings around this conflict, and vice versa? And when we actively listen to the other party, without interrupting, without judging, and without having to agree with them, to listen to them, we build trust and understanding. We can find what's important is important to them. We all want to feel respected, understood, safe, and have hope for our future and those of our kids and future generations. And that's common throughout the entire world. It doesn't matter what culture, where you're from, and I've done this around the world, and we've seen the same thing. So step one, understand yourself and your partner. Next, understand our shared reality. What's the real underlying conflict here versus the symptoms of the conflict? If we're just dealing with symptoms, which often we are, we're not solving the real problem. It's going to be maybe a short-term fix without getting to the real underlying conflict or problem. Then from positive psychology, what's working well for us? What can we appreciate about our partner, if anything? And that puts us in a better frame of mind to resolve it. Next, what's our worst case scenario if we cannot resolve it, and how would it feel? Because often, and we learned this in change management, we need a real or perceived crisis to take action toward change. Then step 3 of Nonflict is to co-create. So we visualize what's our ideal reality and how would that feel? What's our best case scenario and how would that feel? Then what are the obstacles to achieve our best case? Then we look at those obstacles and say, of those that we could control or influence, what could we do to overcome them? Followed by an action plan, who's going to do what and when. So those steps fit on the back of my business card and are detailed in more detail and explanation with lots of stories on how it can be applied in our book, Nonflict.
And you've been able to bring Nonflict, this whole process, into YPO and YPO members and so on. So we'll explore some of that. But we'll explore it by discussing this organization called YPO and your interaction with YPO. How did you get involved and so on? So I know that you were the first Canadian president of the International Formal Wear Association, and the same year you joined YPO at the age of 30. How were you able to join YPO? I mean, what is that onboarding process? What was your experience with that onboarding process?
So you typically, back then, you had to be invited to join YPO. Now one could apply to join. And I'd never heard of it back in 1989 when I joined. I was 30 years old. I was, from a family business background. And the onboarding process was to be interviewed by someone who would sponsor you. Then they would have to get 10 other sponsors. And then it goes to a vote at the chapter level, and basically everyone at the chapter level is aware that you qualify, meaning you have X $million of sales. I think now it's $12 million of minimum sales, US. I think it's 50 or more employees, and that anyone could veto you if you're perceived not to be a good person. Like if they know that you're, not of the character that one would want to associate in this club, then they would, in a confidential way, share that, and you would not be allowed to enter. Obviously, some things happen, in which case, we have committees in YPO to deal with people that might be deemed not to be of the same value system that YPO has. And the mission of YPO is better leaders through lifelong learning and idea exchange. So it's peer-to-peer learning. It doesn't matter if you're doing $1 billion or more in sales or 15 million in sales. We're all peers, and we all could learn from each other in a safe space that's created. And the most intimate part of YPO is what we call a forum, which is a group of people that get together on a monthly basis, about 8 to 10 people, and act as each other's board of directors for their personal and business life.
It's interesting, because you had this tremendous success very early on, and you got invited into this organization, which is over 50 years old, and you had to meet minimum requirements. It's interesting that people have the ability to veto, and so you have to come with this presence of contribution and for good purpose or purposeful leadership in some way and positive contribution. I mean, you are the winner of the Canadian Award for Business Excellence, which was presented by the Prime Minister of Canada, and the YMCA Peace Medals. I think over your career, you have these accolades and things like that. But then you join, you get invited to YPO, you actually join YPO, and you're part of a chapter. So can you talk about that journey of being part of a chapter? And you end up being the chapter chair within that chapter, and some of the roles that you've taken on in your journey within YPO over the last decades, and so you'd be one of the longest contributing active members of YPO as well. So
yeah, there are other members who contributed longer, but I do have, I guess, 32 years of active experience with YPO. And yeah, so I joined the Quebec chapter, and I think there are about 200 odd members in the Quebec chapter now. And I went through the ladder, but first I served as treasurer for about 6 years, which really gave me a good grounding on the board and decisions that are made at the board level in YPO. And then I became the assistant learning officer, the learning officer, chapter chair, and then I became the regional learning officer for the Canadian region, which is when the Nonflict workshop got created. I wanted to do an event that we could all benefit from across our 17 chapters across Canada, which we did, which won 6 best of the best international awards for YPO out of 2,000 events selected. The Nonflict workshop won the best leadership development award in the world. And then they asked me to be on the International Education Committee, which I was on for 4 years, which judged other best of the best and also helped to manage the regional education chair learning officers, as we call them today. So that was, I guess, 2011 to 14. And then I had a role of ambassador for networks for the Canadian region. And then I was asked to join the Peace Action Network, and given the work I do with Million Peacemakers was very aligned with Peace Action Network, where I was the vice chair for 2 years, and now I'm currently in my second year as term of chair. And the other role I have, within YPO, we've got networks, which are personal networks, business networks based on our interests, and then we have family networks such as the parenting community and young YNGers, which are the youth of our members. Then we have impact networks, which I'm on the Peace Action Network, the People Action Network, the Sustainable Business Network, and the Planet Action Network, which are aligned with the pillars of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And I'm the vice chair of the Impact Council and chair of the Peace Action Network. So these are the various roles that I've had primarily through my career. And yes, I've done a number of events. We just hosted an event at the around UNGA Week, UNGA Week, on September the 21st this past year, International Day of Peace. And actually, you participated in that event, helping to moderate one of the panels, which we really appreciate. And that event actually was really rated highly. I don't know if I told you, but I think it was rated 4.78 or something out of 5. And that was the first time we're doing that. We're going to be doing that annually. So that's one of the many things that I've been involved with, and with great collaborators like you and some of the other champions. And I know you've already interviewed Florian, who is the chair of the Impact Council, and Carol, who's chair of the Sustainable Business Network.
So, again, there's these decades of contribution, and also chapter chair YPO Gold Quebec. And you talked about your tenure as education chair. You won regional awards and international best of best awards, leadership development, YPO Gold Canada regional education chair, winning, as you mentioned, the Canadian Best Leadership Development Award and the international best of best awards for all 6 host chapters. And this is involved in the Nonflict workshop as well. And YPO International Education Committee, chair of YPO Gold, Education Worldwide, and to bring you up, as you mentioned, currently chair of the Peace Action Network and vice chair of the Impact Networks Council, which has these 4 networks, the networks being a group of 750 leaders or more. That's how you can form a network. So it's a sort of a group of leaders who have a common attraction to a theme. And you talked about the Impact Networks Council having these 4 network constituents, the peace, of which you've been a longtime member, and of course, chair, planet, which is about, betterment of planet, like climate change and things like that, people, enabling people for good and sustainable business for good and so on. So, okay, this now brings us to the first ever summit next year. Can you talk about that? Because you're involved in that summit and you have an important role in that summit. So how did you get involved in that summit? What do you hope to achieve in that summit? What is your specific role in that summit? And is this going to be a catalyst for greater impact throughout other global communities, also within YPO? What is your vision as part of this team and collaborators working on this summit? So a lot of questions kind of rolled into one, but from your viewpoint and your perspective, because you've been a YPO member for so long and such a successful business person for so long, and a creator of this whole Nonflict process, or co-creator, and then this nonprofit Million Peacemakers. And there's sort of an interweaving of common purpose in there as well, right? Purposeful leadership, purposeful business, purposeful capital, using capital investment in a purposeful way and a good way, all for the forces of good. Okay, so talk about this summit. What is it?
Okay. So the summit is a way of bringing together YPOers and their spouses to learn, to be inspired, to inspire others. It's very much going to be member run. We have some amazing impact champions in YPO and some amazing supporters of YPO. Advisors such as yourself and Julie and others that in a group that you chair, to just learn from each other. To when we come together, magic happens. You have synergies, you have serendipity. The person you're sitting next to invariably becomes someone one collaborates with. It's just magical when we get YPOers together in a room. And I always try to sit next to someone I don't know. And by the end of it, we become friends and potential collaborators. So it's always fun when we're now meeting in person. So the summit is to learn about potentially current impact that we're having, even if we're not considered impact champions, impact leaders. Many CEOs are making a positive impact in ways they don't even know about. So they're going to learn about that and then learn on have the opportunity to take on even greater impact in their businesses and beyond their businesses, using business as a force for good. So my role is I've been asked to share my own personal journey in a TED type of talk. And haven't given that too much thought yet, but they want me to do a similar speech to the one I gave at the Vatican. Which was a 10-minute speech, but now they've given me an hour. So I'm probably going to include a bit of a Nonflict exercise in there, which will take a little time and allow people to connect with each other using active listening and sharing and deep sharing to build a sense of trust and actually love in the room, which we've done with enemies, never mind people that have common goals and a lot of commonality being YPOers. So that's part of my role, and the other part of my role is to work on creating these action forums where people will be choosing one of the pillars of the SDGs, one of the pillars of the impact networks, and to meet people that have similar interests and look at exploring, get to know each other on what our current impact is, and maybe choosing either to support each other in our own personal impact journey or to choose a common project for the group to get behind, a group of about 8 to 10 people to get behind going forward. So there'll be action and actual impact that comes out of this, no matter what.
For the audience, the word forum typically means some kind of public event, right? Smaller than a conference, but like a conference feel. But in your definition of a forum, it's different. Can you describe what a forum is from in your definition of an action forum?
Great. So the traditional form in YPO is, and I think I mentioned earlier, a group of about 8 to 10 people that get together. Total confidentiality. You can take your mask off, be vulnerable, and share, the thing that keeps you up at night, be it in your personal life, your business life. And we have people that are not to tell you what to do, but to listen, ask questions that are thought-provoking questions, then share their own experience that one might learn from, without ever telling the other person what they should do. Because when we're told what we should be doing, we would tend to get defensive and maybe feel a need to defend like be defensive, defend ourselves, and it's not the ideal that we're trying to do here. We're helping to each other to grow and to learn by sharing our own common stories. Because when you get eight members in a room, often we've had similar experiences before, and often when we have a problem, we think we're alone, but we're really not alone. The difference with an action form, though, is it has a purpose of having an end result that is based on a particular problem. That isn't necessarily our own personal problem. It could be climate change or polarization in our city or in the world, or family conflict, or individual conflict and lack of peace of mind, which people in this group would care about. And then we look at how we can make an impact in our lives, in our families' lives, our businesses, and then ultimately our communities. So there is action that takes place after we learn about the problem. The other difference, by the way, with a action form is we could invite outside experts that are not YPOers, such as yourself or some of the other people on your committee who have amazing leadership experience. You don't have to be a member of YPO to be able to really have a ton of input and sharing and wisdom, such as the one I benefit from, and having you a board member of Million Peacemakers. Here you would be able to share some of your wisdom with a action form without having to be a YPOer.
So that's part of the DNA of the Global Impact Summit. Is this the first instance of the Global Impact Summit? Do you want this to scale? I mean, how are you going to catalyze this Global Impact Summit through your contribution and just from your awareness within the YPO community? What is your hope? I guess, what is the ideal case? It's almost like running a
ideal reality. Which ideal reality is really, we're looking at growing what we call YPO 3.0, which is a theme that was started a few years ago by the chairman at the time, and now to really have impact, to be part of the DNA of YPO. And we already have shared this idea with the CEO of YPO, who's a new CEO, Xavier, who's going to be there, and with the current chairman, who's a YPO as well, named Rafi, and they're aligned with it. And we're looking to actually have this be the catalyst to have everyone in YPO learn more about impact, the SDGs, where there might be already having impact on these sustainable development goals, and where they might want to choose to focus more on. So it's really to make this part of the DNA of YPO at not only the top levels of the organization, but really have it be bottom up. And by bringing 150 influencers within YPO, we're together, this is going to spread it and ultimately have huge impact across YPO and then around the world, because as you know, YPOers combined have about $9 trillion of sales and 32 million employees, and really can impact the world. So we're looking at really having this have a huge transformative effect, not only in YPO, but quite literally beyond around the world in 140 plus countries that we serve.
And because peace is a big sweet spot for you in terms of your activities and what you're trying to do, and the world is in such tension at times, peace is definitely something that we need. And you're able to integrate your experience, your journey, your narrative within this broader Global Impact Summit, the first of its kind within YPO, the Global Impact Summit, or GIS. And so why, where's it going to be held and why?
So it's going to be held in Costa Rica, and it's in an eco hotel that's owned by YPO, actually. And so it's very important that we walk the talk. So everything we're going to be doing is going to be eco-friendly, zero waste. Everything is going to be recycled, composted. The gifts that we're going to be giving, and my wife is right now, in the prior meeting, is in compostable bags, and everything is going to be, the food we're having is going to be eco-friendly and organic. And so it's important we walk the talk. In Costa Rica, as you know, is very much an eco-friendly country. Also a nice place to be in February if you come from a cold climate like I do in Montreal. And so that is why we're doing it in Costa Rica in particular, as a destination, but also it's a country that walks the talk. And we're going to ensure that we do as well as an organization when we're there. It is the first, and it's something that we want to grow annually or biannually. I think we have to do the first, learn from it, and then decide how often or how frequently we're going to do it, and in what manner we're going to do it. And that'll be evaluated after the event with the feedback we're going to get from our members.
So what I'm hearing then, and I'm just going to kind of summarize, we talked about, the fact I mentioned earlier, you have great experience in business, both private and public, and different industries, in fact, 4 different industries. You started Million Peacemakers as a nonprofit, and to spread the tools of constructive conflict transformation to business, families, and communities worldwide. You co-authored this #1 bestseller, The Nonflict, The Art of Everyday Peacemaking. We talked about how you, were the first Canadian president of this association. At the same year, you joined YPO, but at that time you were mentored, and it was by invite. And through your business, you've been able to achieve things like the Canadian Award for Business Excellence, presented by the Prime Minister, and the YMCA Peace Medal. We talked about your journey with the YPO, many chair positions, many best of the best region, best of the best, and education, and so on. We also talked about the YPO Impact Networks Council, and YPO being sort of divided into different sort of themes of interest where people can get engaged. And there's one that's based on impact. And you mentioned there's a peace action network, a planet action network, a people action network, and sustainable business action network. And together they form the Impact Networks Council. And you're vice chair of that council, chair of the Peace Action Network, and so on. And I should mention that earlier you had presented at the Vatican as on Nonflict as well, and they had an audience with the Pope and so on. And then we talked and concluded with this first ever Global Impact Summit, of which you've been asked to lead a session, a TED-type session, which you thought would be short. Now it's going to be an hour, so you're saying, hey, why not do a live interactive workshop with the participants there? And so that'll be really interesting for everybody to come together. And you've been asked to do the impact action forums. And you described a forum as this coming together, or people are sharing intimately and so on. But here in this case, you want some action execution or action as a result, focused on maybe one of the big challenges that could be climate or healthcare, food security, and so on, or even the polarization that is around the world. So, and you also indicate it's going to be in Costa Rica because they talk the talk, and even the facility where it's going to be held is very talking the talk. It's very socially aware and conscious in terms of what they do. From an environmental standpoint. and it's a coming together of people who are going to be the crucible, the crux of the hub of spreading the word and taking action within YPO and enabling YPO, but also without their global communities, because YPO members employ millions of people and they have these amazing companies. They have great, outstanding global impact from a financial contribution standpoint and so on. So you got participation top down as well. You indicated that the CEO, the new CEO, is participating, and the chair has exhibited interest. So you can see this confluence. And you also talked about things like the YPO UNGA, the first time you held this year, which was very successful, which had something like a 4.8 out of 5 rating, just amazing. I can see parts of that being a model for this, like the action forum and so on. And you're part of the action forum. You're championing that within this Global Impact Summit. So I just the work is the contribution, the work is just outstanding, Steve. and it just continues. And thank you for reaching out back in March of 2019 when we first met. It's been just an outstanding, amazing journey for me to know you as a person, as a friend, and just to see all of this work that you're doing and you're continuing to do. So I really appreciate you coming in. Do you have any last sort of comments or recommendations you want to give to the audience before we close this chat? And that's my last question.
First, you're very kind. And one thing I do want to reiterate is that everything has been, everything you mentioned has been with other people. I'm just been part of it and blessed to be part of the journey that I've had, but everything included collaborating with others, be it the book with Dr. Amir Kafir and Fred on Million Peacemakers and yourself with Million Peacemakers, and the Impact Forum. I'm doing it with the chair of the Planet Action Network, Saqib. So everything has been working with teams and groups and how to deal with conflict constructively in everything. So I didn't necessarily have the Nonflict tools throughout my career, and it would have been useful earlier. But having these tools now and using these really have been allowing me to be more effective as a leader and to co-create better outcomes and better ideal realities in everything that I've been involved with. And I've used Nonflict in every single committee, every single challenge and opportunity. So all I could say is if you have an Alexa skill, you could get it for free on your phone by enabling it to help you through it. You could learn it. There's a audio book that's for free on what's the name of the big not SoundCloud. It'll come to me in a minute. But there's an audio book available. You could reach out to me on how to get it. And then on Amazon, you could certainly get the hard copy of the book, the old-fashioned way for people that like paper. But really, I've been using Nonflict in every aspect of my life. With my wife, we use it invariably with other relationships, and that's really helped me to be more effective as a leader. And thank you so much, Stephen, for all the impact that you've made. You actually introduced us to the Amazon engineer who brought it to Alexa. You've introduced me to indirectly or directly, actually, to the person who led to John Luca being with our group. And so certainly I could never have done anything alone, and thank you for being such a great connector and leader in my and YPO's impact journey.
Well, thank you again, Stephen. And I'm just marvel at all the work you're doing. So thank you again. And the contribution continues, the impact continues. So take care. And I know you're traveling, so be safe while you're traveling.
Thank you. And we'll see you in Costa Rica.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Thank you for listening to the brand called You Videocast and Podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the brand called You.